Our next speaker is Mr. Pragya Kothari Jain, who would be presenting the transmission of mails during the Quetta. Mr. Jain, FRPSL, FPCI, is a philatelist and researcher with a long standing interest in Indian airmails and classic British India issues. His exhibits have received international recognition, including gold medals at Aero USA 2014 and Singapore 2015, and a large vermeil at Stampex 2019. He also authored Gems of Indian Philately, Edition 1, 2019. Mr. Jain, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the introduction, sir. Disaster relief mails are very interesting to me, and hence the topic of today's presentation is mails transmission during Quetta earthquake 1935. Okay, so before at the beginning of my presentation, I would like to show where Quetta is located. Quetta is located, this is a British India map of 1924, and the purple line shows the railway route. Quetta is located right at the very periphery of the border between India and Afghanistan, British India and Afghanistan. And this also happens to be the fault line where Indian plate meets with the Eurasian plate. It has always been a point where a lot of tectonic activities take place, and it's a very earthquake prone area. In fact, over millions of years, the Indian plate has been shifting ever so closely with the Eurasian plate, and it's now actually rubbing the Eurasian plate. So, the background. At 3 a.m. on 31st May 1935, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck Quetta, Balochistan, which happens to be the capital of the Balochistan province. The earthquake lasted only 30 seconds, but it devastated the entire native town. Nearly half of the 60,000 residents lost their lives. Entire post office staff perished in the disaster, including 44 men of the Royal Air Force. Relief operations began swiftly despite extensive destruction. Essential services were partially restored within days. Pre-posted concession was granted from 4th to 14 June 1935. The Royal Air Force played a vital role in relief, rescue, and communication. This is the map of Quetta showing the extent of disaster. This was published in the government survey of 1935. The area which is marked within the red lines was completely destroyed. So you can see the civil station here, as well as the Royal Air Force landing ground was completely destroyed. Here is the front page of the report, which was prepared by the Government of India. On the right hand side, you can see the General Post Office building. The clock stopped at the first shook, or the first tectonic movement. Here is the map of the study of the tectonic or the extent of the intensity. The two concentric circles in black color shows the extent of the disaster. On the scale, even though the average reading was 7.7, the epicenter witnessed 9 to 10 Richter scale, which is quite immense. And the area falling within 9 to 10 Richter scale was Mastung, Lake Pass, and Chiltern Post, which we'll see ahead in the pictures. This is Mount Chiltern before the earthquake, and the image of Mount Chiltern after the earthquake. You can see the scars of the rock falls. Here is the mud volcano at Thok. Mud volcano generally comes out. This was the geological survey done by the Government of India. And due to the fault line which was created, mud volcano came out. Here one can see clearly the fault line near Mustang. This was the state of the city. This is the Habib Road. All the important areas were completely annihilated. the city police station, the Royal Air Force lines. In fact, within a day or two, people started wearing masks just because of the sheer scale of the debris. This is the state of the twisted rail lines. Again, the rail lines were completely destroyed. This is the bridge which connected Quetta and Mustang Road. You can see that it is giving way. An incomplete railway hospital which is completely demolished. The refugee camps were set up at the racecourse road. Now, the aim of the presentation is to illustrate the postal system responses and the operational measures after Quetta earthquake. Focus on the post-free concession period of between 4th and 14 June, and to highlight the first British Empire-wide post-free mailing concession granted after an earthquake. So an effort was made to provide concessionary service to the mail originating from this area if it was addressed within the empire, British Empire, which means to Canada, to UK, to Australia, New Zealand. The scope of the presentation is, I'll be presenting the study in chronological fashion, including mails with variety of postmarks and hand stamps, mails addressed within India and internationally, demonstrate both surface and airmail routes. We'll be focusing on various hand stamps, RMS postmarks, first-hand correspondence, and postal relief measures which was implemented after the post-disaster. So the postal operations can be divided into 4 parts. The first part is postal operations after the earthquake. Since nearly the entire post office personnel perished in the earthquake, the postal communication had to be established. So RMS came into the picture. Postal duties were taken over by the railway mail services staff. RMS personnel used their own cancellers for mail processing. RMS operational arrangements. Initially, RMS operated from the railway station post office, but within few days they shifted. They cleared the debris of the general post office and they shifted to the general post office ground. 3 distinct cancellers are found. One is the transit canceller of Karachi, and there are 2 RMS cancellers, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 was used up until 7th June and type 2 was used from 8 June to 14 June. Okay. The third part is mail transport and communication services. Some early mail transported by relief flights by RAF. Most outgoing mails were carried by train. To Karachi for onward airmail or international airmail, and to Bombay for overseas surface mail by sea. Free on-site telegram service was available up until 7 June 1935. Because of the telegram, most of the news or information was wired out across the country as well as to the other parts of the world. Later development, increase in airmail usage seen from 10th June onwards, which means there was a normalization taking place in the communication system, reflecting postal policy changes. Most outgoing mail items were addressed to the United Kingdom except for a few rare destinations. Here is an example of a mail which was written from Bombay to Quetta on 31st May 1935. The mail could not be delivered to Quetta because of the disaster and was subject to be returned. Since the address of the sender was not there, the letter was sent to DLO Lahore for disposal purposes. It bears a special cancellation. Undelivered owing to earthquake disaster, returned to the sender. The spelling of the disaster, there's an error in the spelling of the disaster where E replaces the I. This is one of the 4 recorded covers, which was actually addressed to Quetta right before the earthquake. First day of concessionary service, type 1, no hand stamp. So I'll just take you back to the last slide. It took almost 4 days to establish the post office in Quetta. Okay, so the first letter which comes out of Quetta is dated 4 June 1935. So there's no communication between 31st May and 4th and 3rd June. Free postage was authorized by the post office notice on 4 June 1935, but it took a day or two to make the hand stamps. Shown here is a cover from Quetta on 4 June 1935, the first day of the concession, from the mail agent Quetta RMS to Bolaram Deccan. The cover is countersigned by Lieutenant F.A. Godfrey, who was commanding officer at the Royal Engineers. It also bears a cancellation of mail agent Quetta RMS postmark. This postmark is actually unrecorded and is probably this is the unique or only mail which has this cancellation. The 2-line red hand stamp, Quetta earthquake postage free. Following the announcement of the free postage concession, a crude hand stamp was prepared at the Staff College and applied in red on the mail. This cachet was in use between 6th and 10th June. This is the first cachet to be used for post following the earthquake. Here's an example of a cover which is posted via sea route to Great Britain and bears this cancellation. This also bears the Type 1 Quetta RMS cancellation on the reverse. Single line black hand stamp, Quetta earthquake postage free Type 3. The cover sent from Quetta with this new Quetta earthquake postage free postmark arrived in Karachi on 8 June 1935. This means that the cover was posted on 7 June, even though no Quetta date stamp is present. This black hand stamp is probably 7 June happens to be the first day when this black hand stamp was used. Interestingly, this letter is addressed to Quetta Military Nursing Association, headquartered within Quetta. But due to this earthquake, the headquarters was shifted to Karachi, and hence this letter was forwarded to Karachi. This letter is written by Queen Alexandra's Nursing Corps, which had immediately mobilized in the area to help the victims of the earthquake. Here's another example of the Type 3 cancellation, which is addressed to Hyderabad in Sindh district in Sindh district. It bears the Type 2 Quetta RMS canceller at the back, which also has the time and the set to mention beside the date canceller, beside the date slug. On 4 June 1935, India Post and Telegraph sent a memo to all the post offices as well as the telegrams of the British Empire, requesting them not to tax letters from the earthquake area. Mail was sent post-free between 4th and 14th June. The rubber stamp were applied by the RMS staff. Here is a very interesting cover which was ultimately forwarded to Colombo in Sri Lanka. The cover was first addressed to Quetta, within Quetta, and was redirected to Bombay. When the letter reached Bombay, the agents of the client, Captain Steed, forwarded the letter to the ship liner SS Manchua, which was arriving at Colombo on 19 June. Hence, this letter was actually forwarded from Bombay to Colombo. It has arrival mark of Colombo at the reverse. Here is a very interesting letter which is written by Major Basil Holmes, who was one of the major at the 16th Cavalry or the 16th Lancer. Quetta being the border area, 16 Lancers were stationed in Quetta, and this letter also happens to contain the actual letter written by Major Basil, and he provides a first-hand account of the type of disaster which took place in Quetta. Interestingly, you can see the letter has the insignia of the 16th Light Cavalry at the top, as well as the Quetta Balochistan mentioned here. I'll just read a couple of lines from this letter. It says, "My dear Frankie, you will have heard all the Quetta news on the wireless and will have seen it in the papers. The details are not exaggerated. It was simply awful. The center disturbance seemed to be the city, which simply does not exist." And it goes on and on. It's a very interesting letter. I think the exhibit is there in the, it's currently uploaded on the AMC website. One can go and read this letter. Here's an example of a mail which is sent to central part of India, Belgaum, and it shows the railway route. So since the handling post office was moved from Quetta to Rohri, the mail was first transported from Quetta to Rohri, which is indicated by this red line. It connected on the Lahore-Karachi-Balochistan circle, and in the midway at Hyderabad, this again changed into central circle. So this is how mails from Quetta reach central part of India. At the bottom is another example of a mail which is addressed to Shimla. Shimla also happens to be the summer capital of British India. From there, the administration coordinated relief operations for Quetta with officials and supply moving towards the disaster area. Here is a letter, Staff College crested envelope posted to Shimla on 13 June, bearing Quetta earthquake postage-free hand stamp, and in manuscript, at the top right, it is mentioned Quetta earthquake, signed by the writing official. Here are two letters, both are type 1. Now we come back again to the type 1 covers. These are examples of inland airmail service. So this letter is written to Nilgiris in South India. The cover is posted from Quetta on 7 June 1935 by airmail to Nilgiris. Marked earthquake, no stamps available in manuscript. The Karachi air section initially charged 2 annas due mark, which is shown here. Okay. But this was later cancelled in blue pencil by the head sorter. The cover would have travelled on the Karachi-Madras Tata Airways flight on Monday, 10th June, 6:30 a.m., arriving Madras at 9:55 a.m. the next day, which is also consistent with the delivery at Mango Post Office in Otakamund on Thursday, 13 June. Please note that examples of inland airmails are very, very few. Most of the mails which were written within India were all transported through the railway network. Here is an example of a mail which actually slipped through the postal authority observation, and the due canceller was not cancelled. Due mark was not cancelled, and in fact the recipient was charged a due mark for not applying the stamps. The letter is addressed to Ajmer and it originates from Quetta, and due to the sheer ignorance of the postal authority, 2.5 annas was charged from the recipient. Here is a very interesting example of official mails which is written from the affected area, addressed to Karachi. This on HMS cover is dated 14 June 1935. That means last day of the concessionary period, and is sent by controller of the military accounts, which is mentioned here, CMA, controller of the military accounts, Western Command, which was actually shifted to Karachi. Earlier it was in Quetta, but it was moved to Karachi after the disaster. Usually it would have been sorted TPO K4, just K4. But in this case, K4IN is written. The IN marking indicates direction towards the record office, confirming that this handling was directly related to the temporary transfer. You can see here clearly K4IN set number 414 June. Here are two other official mails. These are addressed to Fort Sandeman. Fort Sandeman was located approximately 200 miles from Quetta, and it was connected by a narrow gauge railway line, with the journey taking just under 28 hours. Postal records show mail received at Fort Sandeman from Quetta confirmed that this railway line remained intact following the earthquake. So the earthquake could not damage this railway line. The fort was incidentally named after Sir Robert Sandeman, the colonial officer noted for the peaceful pacification of the tribes of Balochistan. And till date, the Balochistan uprising is still going on. Okay. So, just want to show you. Many envelopes were mailed to Great Britain. Bear a triangular hand stamp on the front, marked with the letters IS. IS standing for Inland Section Chief Office, London. This triangle means, with the letters IS, means Inland Section Chief Office, London. These markings, known as inspectors' marks, were applied by postal supervisors to indicate that the item had been examined and found to comply with the regulation governing mail carried at less than normal rate. In such cases, any blue or red tax notations were crossed out with the line. You can see here that the red tax notation was crossed out by the supervisor in the blue ink, showing no postage due was to be charged. Here is an example of an airmail cover written from the affected area, Quetta, traveling via Karachi, connecting onward the Imperial Airway route in Karachi and addressed to Kent in England. Airmail cover posted from Quetta on 11 June bearing the postage-free hand stamp and the IS inspection mark. Addressed to Kent in England, it was carried by the Imperial Airways flight, which departed Karachi on 12th June and arrived London on 17th June. Here is a very rare example of a mail addressed to New Zealand. This is one of two recorded covers. Recorded covers to New Zealand. The cover probably missed the Imperial Airways flight of IE 347 from Karachi on 13 June and therefore held for next service, IE 348, departing on 16 June. So for 3 days it remained at the Karachi airport and was subsequently transferred to Singapore and then used the Qantas service onwards to Canberra and then arriving to Darwin. And by air then henceforth moved to Adelaide and to Brisbane. The cover was forwarded by sea to New Zealand, arriving on 8 July 1935, subsequently redirected to Auckland. Here is an example, another rare example of a cover which is addressed to Canada. This is again one of two recorded covers to Canada. So the letter arrived in the letter from Quetta reached Karachi airport and was subsequently connected in the ongoing Imperial Airways flight to London. It arrived in London on 21st June and was then forwarded to Toronto, arriving in Toronto on 30th June and delivered on 2nd July 1935. So here is an example of a letter which is written on the last day of the concession, 14 June. It is sent by the airmail service to England and connected via the Imperial Airways flight. It arrived in England on 17 June and was delivered on 21st June. So here is an example of a letter which was written on 15 June after the concession period was over, and it bears the special cancellation Quetta earthquake free postage concession withdrawn. It was also taxed in upon its arrival in UK. Now here are I'm going to show two other interesting examples. Here is an example of a travel warrant. A second-class travel warrant for an adult and child was issued for travel from Quetta to Delhi via Lahore on 13 June 1935. The ticket, valid for holder and half family members, permitted continuous travel over the North-Western Railway to Delhi station without any breaks, departing Quetta on 13 June 1935. This is an example of a travel warrant. And here is an example of a reply which is sent from Information Bureau at Quetta. So Information Bureau were responsible for transmitting information related to the well-being of any relatives or the people who were living in Quetta. If their relatives from other parts of India wanted to know whether they had survived or not survived, here is one such example. On the reverse, the information is clearly mentioned. Mr. Hindu Cooper is dead and Mrs. Hindu Cooper, Mrs. Hindu Cooper is probably staying with Mrs. Bond at Race Course, Quetta. Race Course, I have already shown, also happened to be the where the refugee camps were set up. So here is an example of a letter written from the Viceroy of India, Lord Wellington, thanking the Maharaja of Gondal. The letter is written from his office in Shimla, Vice Regal Lodge in Shimla, where he thanks the Maharaja of, contributing to the fundraiser for the earthquake victims. This is a letter which is written and signed by him personally. So this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thanks for your patience. Special thanks to Max Smith for helping me build this exhibit.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jain.